The 90s were a glorious time for cyberpunk anime. Stories set in a dystopian world that blends biology with technology created a premise that had all of our attention. With lenient censorship that allowed several series to get away with tremendous gore, Tony Takazaki's manga, Genocyber, the beauty devil from Psychic World, got an opportunity to become animated. This adaptation was handled by Koichi Ohara, who used several elements from the manga, but created his very own original video animation, or OVA. However, it retained the dystopian society presented in Takazaki's work, alongside the prominence of a biological weapon known as the Genocyber. This being was presented as the greatest power the world has ever witnessed, and in fact, it was created to fulfill this very role. From the very conception of those who make the Genocyber, there has been a specific focus on its biological anatomy and its alteration. The world of Genocyber and the madness within. The events of Genocyber take place in a war-torn dystopian society. In this dark future, there is little stability in societal order. This society has fallen victim to an astonishing divide between the elite and the common people, who are mostly impoverished. A sense of urban decay prevails, while the common folk have no option but to resort to criminal activities for life to get a tiny bit better. Meanwhile, the higher echelons of society are brimming with money and corruption. So much so that the power held by world governments has been dwarfed by the power wielded by the world's mega corporations. But the battle is less between the government and the corporate. Instead, it is the internal strife among the corporations themselves, who have now resorted to using covert forces and corporate assassins in their attempts to come out on top. One such corporation, known as the Kuryu Group, acts as the focal point in the story of Genocyber. They hold significant influence over the government as Japan's top military weapons developer, and they partake in several unethical activities, such as extensively experimenting on humans for the advancement of their technology. The show lays greater emphasis on advanced biotechnology and cybernetics as the Kuryu Group attempts to combine psychic and cybernetic technologies with one another. It's safe to say that it is not just the poor who have succumbed to brutality. With ample finances to fund large-scale violence, these megacorporations experience a luxury, kinda like what anime enjoyed back in the 90s with their more liberal censorship. Staying true to its cyberpunk themes, the story of Genocyber allows us to witness the repercussions of combining man with machine. Across shows such as Ghost in the Shell, Violet Evergarden, or Appleseed, we have witnessed a variety of stories that can stem from biomechanical humanoid combinations. However, Genocyber takes the cake for being the grimmest and the goriest of them all. It doesn't tug at your heartstrings like Violet Evergarden does, and there's no one to root for like we did for Major in Ghost in the Shell. The thing about Genocyber is, apart from being a product that can aggravate war and destruction, it is born of violence. The stories in the manga and anime follow different paths with a similar premise. However, we're going to discuss the events that have taken place in the Genocyber anime as we discuss how the thing came to be and what it does. The birth of the Reed twins. Unfortunate siblings destined to become a weapon of mass destruction. Before bringing the Kuryu Group into the foray, we need to go back to events revolving around a scientist named Kenneth Reed. He used to work as an assistant to Dr. Newen Morgan, who had been experimenting with psychic energy for a while after discovering a new dimension called the Vajura. In the show, Vajura was the term used to describe psychic energy. Dr. Morgan wished to use Vajura to replace nuclear fusion, which is a process that combines two nuclei to form a single heavier nucleus. This, in turn, releases enormous amounts of energy and is very much the phenomenon that powers the sun and other stars. Right from the get-go, you can imagine how dangerous a weapon that can imitate the explosions within the sun can be. Dr. Morgan created a machine called the Mandala, which could enhance the Vajra. However, the scientists did not have enough money to continue with this research. To get the party started, Kenneth Reed made a deal with the Kuryu Group, which would eventually fund the project. And it didn't take a genius to see the potential. Now the one with the reins, Kenneth killed Dr. Morgan and stole the Mandala machine. The entire ordeal went down while Morgan's wife Tanya was pregnant with twins. Meanwhile, Dr. Morgan's twins were born with enormous psychic powers due to the influence of the Mandala. In fact, one of the twins, Elaine, was born mute and had seemingly crawled out of her mother. After the birth of the twins, Kenneth adopted them to use the twins as his guinea pigs and disposed of Tanya to prevent any hindrances. Needless to say, he was much worse as a father figure compared to the likes of Gendo Ikari from Neo Genesis Evangelion and Jing Freaks from Hunter x Hunter, and almost as bad as Shao Tucker from Full Metal Alchemist. That's a whole nother story. The twins Elaine and Diana Reed grew up with Vajra influencing everything in their lives. While they were in Tanya's tomb, Diana, in her madness and envy towards Elaine's powers, had tried to kill her, leading to Elaine losing control over her Vajra. The latter was seemingly transformed as a result of the energy released, which in turn resulted in Diana being born with non-functional limbs. Meanwhile, Elaine was physically perfect, but her mind worked like that of an immature wild animal. It was later revealed that Elaine also possessed a multiple mind shadow, and Diana was the only one to get access to it, albeit unconsciously. To make the utmost use of this phenomenon, their father, Kenneth Reed, created a new mandala machine to fuse them and their powers with one another. Not only would it generate abnormal amounts of energy, but Elaine's mind shadow would amplify Diana's powers as well. The intent makes it evident that Kenneth Reed is a megalomaniac with a Frankenstein complex, and although he fails to do it as per his wishes, the two twins do fuse eventually to create the Genocyber. Events in the Genocyber: how the world found its new god. In the first episode of the show, we're exposed to the premise, which is set in Hong Kong. We get to witness Elaine living her life as someone who is constantly being experimented on to become a biological weapon. Mentally stunted and extremely nervous as a person, one fine day, the 14-year-old Elaine escapes. We also get to meet Diana Reed, who has almost zero muscle tissue and as a result is immobile. She is seen moving thanks to the cybernetic body developed for her by her adoptive father. However, the twins do not know that Reed is not their real father. Although Diane is not as psychically blessed as Elaine, she is the only one who can gain control over her due to her ability to enter Elaine's mind shadows. However, she lives a painful life like her sister, as she is routinely tortured and controlled by Kenneth Reed to prevent her from disobeying him out of fear. He needs the complete submission of the twins to combine them and create a Vadronoid, or a cybernetic being with superior abilities, in this case, the Genocyber. However, Kenneth's desperate research comes to a sudden halt with Elaine escaping the lab. Around this time, Elaine meets a young boy and the two grow very close to one another. Meanwhile, Diana is sent to track her down and bring her back. As she tries to gain control of Elaine after finding her, the latter's psychic powers cause a reaction and kill Diana physically. She then kills all the others the Kurio group had sent after her and takes down the attack helicopters. The two sisters vanish from the face of the earth as Elaine takes over Diana's cybernetic body and controls it while Diana continues to exist as a consciousness. In fact, they had fused as a result of the explosion and were now the singular being known as the Genocyber. This is something Kenneth Reed had always wanted, but he was oblivious to how it would come back to bite him in the rear. Because the young boy who Elaine had grown close to was killed by the government agents towards the end, the Genocyber created a powerful reaction out of grief that wiped the city of Hong Kong right off the map. The hybrid of the Genocyber looked like one of the many stereotypical anime mechas, but as we know by now, it's more of a biomecha than something that is 100% technology. The humanoid weapon is seemingly omnipotent as well as immortal, which becomes evident across the next few episodes. In the second episode of the OVA, which is set in Korean, Elaine acquires a new name. Now renamed Laura by a young doctor Myra, Elaine proves her prowess as the strongest Vajra in combat, taking down the likes of American carriers. We get to see some of the Genocyber's attacks, which focus mostly on fire and flames at this point. In one of the fights, an arm of the Genocyber gets hacked off. Mad scientist Sakomizu uses the arm to create a new Vajra. Unfortunately for him, the sentience of the severed arm results in him being incapable of controlling its expansion throughout the carrier. The entire crew, barring Myra, is consumed, and the latter is able to recognize that the Genocyber is Laura. Falling into the pits of insanity due to the recent events, Myra spots the Genocyber spreading its wings and flying away, and yells at Laura or Elaine to take her with it. The third OVA takes place a century after the events of the second OVA. It is implied that the world has more or less been destroyed by the Genocyber, while humanity still continues to fight a hopeless war against it. At this point, the Genocyber is considered to be a myth, and Elaine is deemed to be a god. Meanwhile, the Genocyber lays dormant under the surface as both Diana and Elaine ponder over the world having no place for power as great as theirs. However, the Genocyber soon learns of the city of the Grand Arc, which was one of the last remaining human cities. The place had been corrupted by an evil mayor, and the events led to the city troops killing the people who had found refuge underground. Diana had a psychic link with a blind girl from the city named Mel, who she used to refer to as her big sister. Mel's lover, Ryu, had been killed by the city guards, and it was Diana's probable connection with Mel that led to the reawakening of the Genocyber from its state of dormancy. Soon, it decimated the city and its people, but the Genocyber kept Mel alive. Intriguingly, it used its inexplicable powers to bring Ryu back to life. This episode proved how the Genocyber had no understanding of morality or what was right and what was wrong. This could be due to Elaine having control instead of Diana, since Elaine's mind was severely underdeveloped. She assumed that she was doing a good thing by killing everyone and saving Mel and Ryu, but at the end of the episode, the couple was left in the ruins of the last civilization on the planet. An interesting detail here would be the sound of a baby crying after the Genocyber left the planet altogether. This implied that the world that was left with only two people would go on to procreate and restart life on Earth once more. With Genocyber gone, Earth would get its shot once more. What makes the Genocyber so omnipotent? Throughout the story, the Genocyber has boasted powers that are unrivaled. Its first advantage would be immortality for the very simple reason that the Genocyber does not possess a human body anymore, and with no one to rival its powers, it can neither die nor be killed. In terms of powers and abilities, there has been a lot of off-screen leveling of cities, which led to the nigh destruction of Earth. Elaine herself had impeccable Vajra powers that allowed her to perform a myriad of feats. Some of these amazing abilities include telekinesis, breaking psychic barriers, entering other dimensions, sensing her own sister and the future, teleporting, and creating images of bugs that made a cyborg tear its own head out. Elaine could also possess others, manipulate wind and electricity, and perform lower levels of regeneration. As the Genocyber, the being has every power imaginable aside from the standard super strength, super durability, reflexes, speed, and the likes. It can fly into space and rip cyborgs in half. However, its Vajra powers are where it really shines. In fact, its very birth resulted in the explosion of a street. The Genocyber can pull off feats such as preventing cyborgs from moving, creating shields that stop bullets, creating ginormous explosions that are visible from space, breathing fire, causing objects to levitate, and it can freeze itself. Although the powers possessed by the Genocyber are not unrealistic within the bounds of superhero stories or shonen anime, the biological weapon is made to exist in a realistic world with realistic humans, which in return makes such a being godly. Elaine and Diana had their anatomies fantastically altered before their birth, and the resulting psychic powers were enhanced over the years, which eventually led to the Genocyber becoming a biological weapon of mass destruction. Its anatomy, which was conceptualized as a means for ridding the world of its energy problems, ended up wiping out the world instead, and it could have all been avoided had a mad scientist not decided to play God with two little girls' innocent lives. Marvelous verdict. With that, today's video comes to an end. When we first completed this OVA series, we actually really needed a breather, if we're being honest with you, but then we realized just how much of a dystopian masterpiece Genocyber really is. A Megazord-esque death monster that is both the god and the devil in a world that is nearly dead because of said god-devil's actions. And it all began with two girls and a father's dream. But that's enough from us. What did you think of Genocyber and its insane anatomy? Did you enjoy this video? If so, then don't forget to like and comment on this video. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.